You would then click on this Global Sat button. Actually, before you do that, you're going to push the on-off button just for about a half second until the power LED begins to flash. And once you see it flashing a red-orange color in the background, then you double-click this Global Sat and this will appear. You don't want this up before you push that on-off button. Otherwise, this won't be populated right here where it's showing COM port 15. When we click here, you'll notice that we've got a couple of them. I know already that the COM port 15 is the one we want. Oftentimes it'll be the bottom one, and so happens that with this one it is the top COM port. So when I click Start, we see here that the serial port has opened successfully, and this is populated on this side. Once we see this populated, click on Load from the device. Now these are the pre-settings that have come to us from the factory. We've asked them to put in the time zone for Perth. That can be changed. In fact, we recommend that if you're in the eastern states, this should be changed to whatever time zone you're in. The 28,800 represents 8 hours in seconds, which is what Perth is in Greenwich Mean Time. If you're in the eastern states, then the difference is 10 hours, or I should say 10 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Well, that's going to translate to 36,000 seconds, so you would enter 36,000 right there. The device ID. This really has no bearing on any functionality. This is what we put the person's name. We write the person's name right there, but it doesn't matter whether it's left blank or not. Same here as PIN code. That is irrelevant. Phone number of the SIM card. Again, we write the phone number in of the SIM card that we put in. This is for our record-keeping purposes because we save a copy of the file that we've programmed. But again, whether you put any number there or not, or in fact if the user decides to change their SIM card, whatever number is entered here has no bearing on the functionality of the unit. Where it shows warning threshold of capacity, the 15 represents the fact that at 15% battery power remaining, the device will send a low battery alert. The 10% represents the fact that the device will automatically shut down to save the battery when it gets down to 10%. This 01 represents the fact that the low battery alert is on. If we click it, we see here that the SMS is enabled. If we untick it and click Apply, this will then show 00, which means there's no low battery alert to go out. We'll go ahead and set it for low battery, so we click there and enter, and then that changes to 01. This is all really you need here on this main page. Then go to the next page, GPS. Now the default is that it's showing the first report time as 5 seconds. That's pretty quick, but you can make it even quicker. In fact, let's go ahead and change it to 1 second, since it's the first report time, and I'll explain why on another page. But let's just go ahead and make that 1 second. Now, if getting a GPS location is important, then you'll want to make some changes here. I would suggest where it's showing, for example, maximum GPS time off. If you make this 600 seconds instead of 3600, we find that it has no bearing on the standby time. So let's change that to 600, and we'll come back to this. I'll explain a little bit more about what you might want to have here, but we'll leave that with those settings for now. On the communication page, this tick right here means that it's going to send a text that says ACK before it sends any other text. And that comes in pretty quick no matter what the report time is. So if you'd like to get that, it's just one more text you're going to get. Otherwise, you can go ahead and untick that. Distributors, I suggest you put your phone number here. And this allows you to receive a confirmation text of whatever you program in if you want to program or make any changes remotely. That's all we need on this page. Let's go to the security page. Now this is where you'd enter the emergency contact numbers. So here where it's showing phone number 1, you'd enter the phone number here. If you're entering a landline, enter 61, then whatever the area code is. For example, in New South Wales, it'd be 612, and then whatever the local number is. If it's a mobile phone number, it can be 04, and then the rest of it doesn't have to be 614. That can start with the 0. If you want 000, you can just enter the 000 number in these boxes. We see here that you can enter up to 6 emergency contact numbers. Now this 20 represents the number of seconds in between calls that it makes sequentially. For example, it calls contact number 1. In 20 seconds time, if the phone isn't picked up, it's then going to move over to contact 2 and begin calling contact 2. If the phone goes to voicemail, then it stops making the sequence of calls. That's the same on all mobile alerts. If you want it to, let's say someone has their voicemail set to go off at 15 seconds. Well, you can make this anytime less than 15, and if you made it 12, then after 12 seconds, which is fairly quick, the phone's going to ring for that period of time and then move across to the next emergency contact number. So 20 is a good one to leave, but you can decide for yourself how you want to play that out. The number of time, the loop time represents the number of times that the sequence of calls is going to be made. If you have 6 emergency contacts and it calls everybody, it's going to call them one time through with the number 1, or we see here you can make it anything from infinity up to the number of 255. So this G8, this enable whitelist, if this is ticked, which I think it is as the default on your unit, what that means is only these 4 people here, the numbers that are entered in at these 4 places, are able to call the unit. We generally recommend that anyone is able to call the unit, but if the customer wants just certain people, select people to call it, well, they can have up to 4 numbers, and those numbers need to be entered here. They don't have to be the same as the emergency contacts. Usually they are, but if there's 6 emergency contacts, well, then they're going to have to decide which 4 of those are allowed to call the unit if they want this one ticked. The report media represents the fact that this is going to come by text. We see here that the SMS represents the 01. That's what it should be on, is 01 all the time, so the text can come through. Now, this max number of SMS reports for each phone number, right? The default is 1. If you had it set for 2, then the advantages in doing that might be this. Let's suppose, for example, you had 1 second here where the report is going to come in after 1 second. Well, what you could do is, if you're going to have 2 reports, you could have the report interval be something like, let's say it's 60 seconds. So the first report comes in almost right after the SOS button is pushed. Well, the second report is going to come a minute later. Now, generally, it takes several seconds, usually at least a half minute, for the device to pick up the satellites when it's called for, when the button is pushed and it begins to either look for the satellites, and it will show you either the reading will come as not fixed, which means it can't see the satellites, it's giving you the last known location, or it'll come across as either 3D fix or 2D fix. 3D fix would be the best. That's giving you a 3-dimensional fix of your location. That's the most accurate. If it's showing 2D, well, that means it's missing some of the satellites, but it's still giving you a pretty accurate location, just not as pinpoint. And then not fix means it's giving you the last known location. That's likely because you're either in a building where it can't see the satellites, or it's just in an area where you're not getting a good reading because you're not allowing it sufficient time to get a reading. So if getting a reading is important, you'll want to make this 60, or you could even make it 120 to increase the likelihood of getting a GPS reading, because it'll send the first one pretty quick, but then the second one will come and you have increased the chances of getting a GPS reading by increasing this time to at least 60 seconds, where that second report is going to come a minute later after the first one. Of course, the downside of that is it's costing the user multiple texts each time, and if you've got 6 emergency contacts, you have that being 2, you're sending out a lot of texts. But again, because it's an emergency, because it is an emergency device, usually the cost of emergency text is of minor consequence, if it is indeed an emergency. We move down here to where it shows auto answer. If this is ticked, that means you don't have to push the button to answer the device. If an emergency contact or anybody else calls the device, it will automatically answer after one ring. We generally recommend that that not be used and let the user have the opportunity to push the button to answer. There would be occasions when some people may want that, but again, we generally discourage it. Enable button to hang up the call. With this ticked, this means either the calling party or the user of the EZ is able to hang up the call. If that's left unticked, then only the person who calls into the EZ is able to hang up the call, which is why we like to have that one ticked. Here in the ring or vibration, you can have that set for any number of things. We like to have it set for both, or we recommend for both. The speaker volume, notice there are three settings, 3008 and 12,000, 8,000 being right in the middle. All of them are speakerphone volumes, and the volume is actually quite loud on this little unit. For people whose hearing isn't what it used to be, well, they can go ahead and have it set at 12,000, and even if their hearing is weak, if the device is put right in their ear, it is a very strong volume. If your hearing is normal, you would not want to put the unit in your ear with this speakerphone volume of 12,000. It is quite loud. So we'll go ahead and leave it on 8,000 for now. Ringtone volume, it can go up to 4. 3's plenty, we find. And this last tick right here, if this is ticked, this means all of the numbers that are entered up here for the SMS phone numbers will each get a call in sequence, assuming it doesn't go to voicemail from somebody first, in which case that's going to stop the sequence of calls. But if that's left unticked, that means only texts will go to the emergency contacts. If they want to get the call as well, then that needs to be ticked. So once this is all entered in like that, you would then save the information to the device by clicking there. It's going to load it all up, and all the settings we've now entered are now programmed into the unit. What we like to do is click Save to the device. That will give us the opportunity to enter the person's name, and then we would take that file and we'd put it with a bunch of other files that we would have with everyone's name, so that any time we could look and see what we had programmed for an individual by going to looking at what the file that we had made in their name. Well, that's how to enter everything. If you have any questions, you can always call, but thanks for listening.